Hey everybody, it's Jay. I'm back with a new video on some of my recent trips and other things that I've done recently. So to get started, I last week I went to the KS Conf out in the San Francisco area. It was hosted by Gremlin, and I really enjoyed it. I wrote a blog post on it on the website. If you go to jdestro.org, you can read a full wrap-up of what happened. I thought it was a great time. I put together what I thought was a really great wrap-up of just all the things that I saw. Really can't applaud that team enough. What a great job they put together. Really great talks by Jesse Frizzell. Really great talks by Adrian Cockcroft and some other people like Mark McBride of Turbine. Really got a lot out of it. It was nice to see that this chaos engineering thing isn't just really it's not just a simple fad. It's something that's about resilience. And resilience engineering is really what I would call it, but chaos sounds a lot cooler. Then after that, I went to Velocity here in NYC. Saw a lot of really cool speakers. So Velocity is O'Reilly's distributed computing conference, and it was just really, really cool. Saw a lot of great speakers. Saw people like Alice Goldfuss and Bridget Comrot. If I said your last name wrong, I'm so sorry. I'm terrible with pronouncing things. And then there were talks by people from all sorts of different companies. Really learned a lot more about how Kubernetes is still so young as a technology, but we're still, very, very interested in seeing how it will be pushed out there into the market. So it was good to hear from people who are actually building it and extending it, doing new things with Kubernetes, and also giving people some advice on what not to do with Kubernetes. And one of those things that really came up a few times were databases. You want to try to keep your databases outside of Kubernetes because these are things that I always feel really aren't made for something that's really supposed to be stateless. With databases, you're going to want to retain a state with your application typically. And if you look at what the intent for containers typically are, they are really meant for stateless based applications so that you don't need to worry about if a container dies. You can just go ahead and replace it. So just some thoughts. So today I'm going to go through a bit of a tutorial and I want to show you something that I picked up really quickly the other day when I was learning how to make some changes to my blog's infrastructure. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at the scale up and scale out portions of the app service that's available to you within the Azure portal. So let's get started. If you have an app service, what I recommend you would do in this particular case is just start with your resource group, go to the particular resource group you want to work with. In this case, it's going to be jdestro-blog. So within here, and let me expand this a little bit more, just so you can see it more. We're given a whole bunch of resources that we can start working with and taking a look at how they're performing. So what I noticed yesterday is I had a number of 500 errors that were going on, and it really was because I didn't have enough containers, nor did I have the right configuration I thought for this blog. I thought I had enough CPU and everything, but I really didn't. Don't mind all the sirens and stuff you may hear in the background. This is New York City. It's kind of just part of living here. Sorry. Anyhow, so I noticed a bunch of 500 errors, and then I took a look at some of the more metrics. And obviously, you can look at the metrics right in here. You can look at data in. You can look at requests, data out, response time. That's not great, that 3 seconds. So there's probably some more additional things I could do to it. I could put a CDN in front and reduce the amount of time it takes to load images. There's a lot more acceleration I can put into the actual WordPress application, which was what this is all based on. We're all doing this with WordPress. So let's start taking a look at these two features that we'll talk about here, which is scale up and scale out. So scale up is for scaling up. adding larger, bigger servers with more CPU, more cores of that CPU, additional memory. So right now I'm using these 2-core servers, the P2V2. There's a bunch of different options for you, the S1, the S2, the S3, and this is for production. There are isolated workloads, but it's not available for this type of configuration. And if I was doing this and I wasn't in production, I could use this particular pricing tier, which is extremely low. 5580 for an active application is pretty nice. And the fact that you can scale it up to 3 instances doesn't really hurt that much either. You get 10 gigs of storage. It's a pretty decent price considering the typical size of a lot of these types of applications, which is not that big. So let's look at production. I'm going to leave this at P2V2. I don't need to upgrade that size, but if I wanted to, I could easily just modify to one of these additional, or one of these other pricing tiers. And you see all the features that you get with all these different types of tiers. You get custom SSL, auto scaling, staging slots, daily backups. And daily backups is really important. Not having to manage what you have to do as far as backups and rotation of those backups, things like that. You want to stay away from that stuff so you can just focus on application creation and deployment. So what we're going to do, and let me give you just a little bit of insight. So this particular application we're working, it's a WordPress app, and all we really need to do to go ahead and take a look at what I've done is I just used this JDestro blog, and then behind it what I decided to do was I didn't really feel like managing MySQL within a container. What I really wanted to do is just use one of the services that we have. So if you go to MySQL, you can see right here Azure Database for MySQL Server. I have my database hosted here. So the changes we're going to make are going to be independent of what our database is doing. Our database is simply just going to be on its own and in the cloud. We can go ahead and do things like if we wanted to, we can create a duplicate. We could change the size of this if we needed to. And that's all done through this section here in pricing tier. But that's not really what our focus is in right now, but I just wanted to make sure you saw it and you got an idea of what exactly we were doing here with this particular app. So let's go back to where we were. So we're going to scale out at this point, and we'll talk about auto scaling. So right now I have it set up with manual scaling, and I have it right to just 2 instances. But if I say wanted to do this automatically, I can click Enable Auto Scale. So enable auto scale will give me the ability to go ahead and create a group, and we'll call it JDestro blog ASG auto scaling group. And then what we'll do is we'll create a scale condition. And I believe what we can do is this. Go in here, scale mode, and we'll scale based on a metric. Scale out and scale your instances. Add a rule that increases by CPUs. So let's add a rule. So we'll go with a very, very basic. As you can see, it's just going to go by the metric resources that are available to us. We can also use application insights, which is really, really cool. I've enabled that for my blog. So I can go into average, select a metric, and say, I want to look at, say, how many times availability. So if availability is less than, say, 2 minutes, what I can do is look at the average and say greater than, and then we also have CPU. So we have the duration, how long this will last. So let's, not really sure what this threshold is. But you can see there's different types of metrics that you can create these alerts on. So let's go back to some just basic, and let's just do current resource. And what I'm going to select the metric of is CPU percentage. So I'm going to say that the threshold is 70, and if it's at 70% of CPU usage for more than 5, then I want the increase the total count of instances by 2. And I want it to take 5 minutes per instance to actually do those cooldowns. So now if we click Add, we can see now we've got an auto scaling group configured that it will say when service plan is over the 70, they'll increase the count by 2. And then we can have instant limits of what our minimum, so how many is the minimum amount of servers that we want up. And 1 is a reasonable amount of number. And what's the maximum? Well, we can say 2 is the maximum. And the default, or I should say no, because we're going to increase by 2 actually. So we can say 10. Because if we're starting with 1, we can go to 3, and then if it's still high, it'll add 3 more. I should say 2 more, so then we'll go to 5. So we'll set the maximum to 10. We'll set the default to 1. And then we'll say that we can schedule this, that the scale condition is executed when none of the other scale conditions match. So that means you have to have these particular conditions for this to all kind of occur. Now we can actually do what I believe is scale to a basic. So what I believe we can do also is we can scale on a metric when we've gone ahead and reduced. And we can say that, when we're so less than or equal to, and let's say we're back to 25%, and we're back there after at least 10 minutes, we can decrease the count to 1. And we'll say it'll take 5 minutes to perform the whole action. The amount of time to wait after a scale operation before scaling again. For example, if a cooldown is 10 minutes and a scale operation just occurred, autoscale will not to attempt to scale again for another 10 minutes. This is to allow metrics to stabilize first. So what we want to do is if we're at 70, we don't want it to just keep operating more scaling because we want to give everything a chance to actually normalize. If our CPU, after adding 2 more instances, goes down to 30%, then if we wait that 5 minutes in cooldown, we'll no longer need to continue to add more instances. So it saves you from creating a ton of additional infrastructure that you don't need to. Then there's other things like we can do these on specific times and dates so that we can make it so that maybe we have a plan where every day at Friday at 5 o'clock, our specific type of development environment scales from, say, 10 containers down to 1 container. Those are things that you can create within the portal here in Azure. So I've gone ahead and I've set CPU percentage to have a scale down rule as well. So we'll just go ahead and click add. So we have a scale out rule. Yep, we've got a scale in rule, and that's all we really need to do. So now we can go here and click save. And updating our auto scaling configuration. So now, as people continue to use my blog, and if I have an abundance of new users, I don't need to worry about having to manually modify the amount of containers that are associated with serving my blog. And that's giving everything for the PHP and Apache and all the underlying requirements that I set up when I actually picked an app service plan for WordPress. So we'll go ahead. Our auto scaling configuration is all done. And now I can go back to using my blog and doing what it is I need to do to access and work with my website. So that's really it. It's not that hard to work with autoscaling within Azure. This is just getting started with it. There's a lot more features. So if we look up Azure autoscaling services, app service, you'll be able to get a lot more on our docs section. You can look at auto scaling and app service environment. I'll make sure that you can get this particular link in the comments of our video here and in the blog post. But you can get information on how to configure worker pools. You can do a lot of things manually within the portal. If you want to do it programmatically, you can do a lot of this stuff, I believe, within the Cloud Shell as well. And there's some really great example of rules that you can use to scale down and scale up. It'll really help you kind of create a strategy so that when you do have an increase in popularity on applications or just want to reduce the size, you know how to do it and you don't have to do it manually. And ultimately, that's what a better portion of what we're doing in operations is all about now. It's reducing the amount of time that we actually have to put into doing the big overhead. If you automate things, you reduce the overhead and time that it takes to really do the work you need. All right? So that's about it for this particular lesson today. If you want to know more about auto scaling, like I said, check out docs.microsoft.com. And if you want to ask any questions, just go ahead and reach me on Twitter. It is Jade Estro on Twitter. There you can go. You can find me. It's baseball season, so I'm tweeting a lot about baseball. I'm wearing my Yankees hat. I got to go to one of the playoff games here in Yankee Stadium on, when was that? Wednesday. It was a lot of fun. Tonight's the first game between the Yankees and the Red Sox, and the Yankees should hopefully win. Sorry, Boston fans. It is what it is. And that's really it for today. Thanks a lot for watching, and leave some comments. Give me some thumbs up, stuff like that. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.